Welcome to Interesting Choices, the show where we talk about movies, TV, books, albums, pretty much anything, as long as it makes choices that any reasonable person would find interesting, and hopefully sometimes good. I'm one of your hosts, Sky.
I'm your other host, Kate.
Hi, Kate.
Hey, Sky.
This week, we're dipping back into the 90s, if only briefly.
Yeah, 1999 was the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, to me at least, 2000 also kind of felt like the 90s, but I feel like the first year of a new decade always feels like the last year of the last decade, too, so.
Yeah, honestly, a lot of what we think of the 70s is like late 70s, early 80s, and the same with the 80s, right? Like, everything bleeds into the following decade.
Yeah, there's a whole, I think, spiel about that in the Limey. About what everyone remembers as the 60s was just the last 2 years of the 60s, and everything else is what people think of as the 50s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those last 2 years are super, super influential.
But yeah, we're talking about G versus E.
Yeah. Originally called G versus E when it was premiering on the USA Network. It later, I think it ran for one season and then was canceled, found its way to a new home on Sci-Fi, where they rebranded it Good versus Evil, and that's how you might know it if you were a Sci-Fi watcher in the early 2000s.
I remember it mostly from flipping past it on Sci-Fi, and I feel, especially after watching the first episode, like I missed out.
It is a stylish show. That's what a lot of reviewers, when the show first came out, they called out how stylish it was compared to everything else that was on TV at the time. It just has a good feel to it.
Yeah. In my notes, I have it specifically written down. I wasn't always quite sure what was going on. That was partially due to the quality of the episode I watched. I was still having fun. So, take that for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a show kind of like a Firefly or anything from, the oeuvre of, unfortunately, Joss Whedon. It's that charming banter. We're fighting evil, but also having a good time with our friends. And we're serious, but we're not that serious. It was that emblematic feel that permeated the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, and this really kind of soaked itself in that stylish, I don't know what you want to call it, like a miasma or something, something about the time. Everyone was, it feels very much like the advertising for Go or the Mod Squad. I feel like there's a lot in common between those styles, especially for the time. The cinematography was just on another level. Mm-hmm. Maybe not necessarily a good one, but they were trying stuff to make shots stand out.
It's that millennial zeitgeist. Everyone was just infected with the feeling of promise of a new century, a new millennium, and things were exciting, and everyone was pumped about technology and the future. That's when we all had hope and we believed in things. As opposed to just being deeply cynical and despairing.
I was sinking into despair laughter there, but then I also remembered that the orientation video that he gets is on a VHS. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a show that's both cleverly written and cleverly produced. But let's describe it, the setup first, so that the audience kind of knows what we're talking about if they haven't had a chance to see it yet.
The basic premise is the main character, or the audience POV character, Chandler Smythe, pronounced Smythe, played by Clayton Rohner, a.k.a. the Rain King.
Yeah, a returning star from a previous Interesting Choices. That is the one thing that I've learned doing this show as long as we have, is that there's a small pool of maybe not A-tier actors, but people that get consistent work, that kind of bounce in and out of a lot of TV and bit parts in movies and things, and I love it.
I will say, no matter how you classify his performance, he puts in A-tier effort in everything, and he has got some range. This is a completely different character, and I honestly kind of feel bad for calling him Dollar Store Bill Paxton. in the Valentine's episode.
That's the character he was playing, though, and that's totally fine. In this, he still has some of that same slimy charm, but it's a different take on it.
Yeah, it's kind of more of a gritty slime, almost a muddy slime.
Mm-hmm.
He's killed by probably the worst makeup demon I've ever seen, but it's a demon. He comes back and he's recruited into the core, and their job is to fight evil on Earth.
Yeah, the core is kind of a heavenly bureaucracy, I guess. Kind of like...
Yeah, hesitate to say police force, but...
Yeah, it's like, what if the heavenly forces ran the CIA, but didn't give them enough money or training or like weapons or anything? They just like, this thing needs to happen, so just do something. It's fine.
You died, but you came back. You don't have any powers. You're not allowed to have sex or talk to the people you used to know. And also you have to fight demons, who do usually have powers. Have fun.
Yeah, it's the members of the core are definitely put into a disadvantage coming out of the gate in this battle of G versus E, good versus evil. It is the side of the core versus the sort of demonic entities, which are kind of broken up into two, technically three different factions. There are some sort of demons. We don't see them in the first episode, but like something is going around giving out bargains and deals to people that want to trade their soul away for riches, power, fame, wealth, beauty, whatever people trade their soul away for.
Yeah, and if you make a deal with the devil, you make a Faustian pact, and they start calling you a Faustian, which I thought was a really cool stylistic choice because it kind of nails home everything you need to know about that in one word. Like, it's boom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then a Faustian is just a person who's made a pact with demonic forces, but when they die, they become what they call a Morlock, which is basically like, you're a person, but you're also a demon, and you do demonic things. Faustians can be saved if they choose to renounce their pact, but if they don't, they automatically go to Morlock Town, and, it's bad. That's because bad. You don't want them roaming around on Earth. It's not like you go to Morlock and you go to hell. It's like you just become a demonic agent on Earth, possibly
for hell.
Yeah, possibly giving out more deals, spreading hell's influence, the whole jibber jabber.
They don't play it up as much, but I think that was a really cool idea, that the goal of the core is to try to save as many Faustians as they can and not just murder all the demons. Like, I feel like if this was made like a year later or a year before, that would have been the thing. Like, they would have had machine guns and gone in, guns a-blazing, shooting demon-killing bullets, like Supernatural ended up doing, essentially.
Mm-hmm. If this was a different show, they would probably lean a little bit more into the whole, like, we have to save the people that made these deals. But as we kind of alluded to earlier, it's kind of a snarkier version of that. So if the Faustians get saved, it's kind of a byproduct of Chandler Smythe and his partner, Henry McNeil, their work, quote unquote work.
Yeah.
So they're not particularly in it.
Ostensibly, the goal is to save people, but that's really more of a byproduct of their adventures.
Yeah, and much like anyone that works in a bureaucracy, like, you may have joined for noble reasons, but at some point it just gets ground out of you, and it's just a job, and kind of a crappy one at that, and that is the tone from minute one in the core.
Yeah, like, there was something about the show where I wanted to sell it short a little bit. And then they pulled a fast one on me, and I couldn't believe I didn't see it coming, because that would have been the first thing I would have thought of. But it's like, no, this show's not that smart. And it's like, hey, now who's a dumbass?
Yeah, it is not the smartest show on TV, but it is clever enough to keep you entertained and interested the whole episode.
Yeah, they don't dwell too much on any one thing. I was afraid they were going to really lean into him missing his family, and they really only briefly touch on it for a moment. It might come up later in other episodes, but at least for the first one, And it's pretty rare for these premiere episodes where it's not 2 episodes stitched together to make one longer episode. It's its own first episode, which is really nice. It's kind of a breath of fresh air compared to Prophet and Super Train.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They managed to lay everything out pretty well in the first episode, so you know exactly what you're getting into. The first 5 minutes of the show are Smythe at some sort of party for himself, and people are celebrating him, and they're like photos of his life coming up. He goes out, immediately gets murdered, joins the Corps, and then meets his partner, who we didn't talk about. Henry McNeil is an amazing character.
He also puts in like a huge performance in this. People might know him best as Jubal Early from Firefly, but he's been working consistently since 1983. He was in The Hidden. If you're a fan of cult films, I know I am, and that was a big surprise, so I'm gonna be looking out for him next time I take a peek at it. And the funniest thing is he got his start in Hill Street Blues.
Yeah, we're talking about the actor Richard Brooks, who plays Henry McNeil, and that man has been in everything on TV for the last, 2 decades.
ER, NYPD Blue, Diagnosis Murder. I could go on. This would probably be an hour-long episode if we just named what he's been in.
Yeah, he was in The Flash, Bosch, some other things. But yeah, he's just all over the place. Like, again, actors get all over the place. Like, this guy has been working since 1983 and has not taken any time off. He's a busy guy.
Like, I loved his performance in this, and especially as far as Clayton Rohner goes. I remember thinking when we watched X-Files that I would love to see more of him, especially in a show. And then we got that, and I'm hoping that happens again.
Yeah. So Richard Brooks plays Henry McNeil, who is a guy that died in the height of a blaxploitation era 70s. He has a strong Shaft vibe going on. He drives an orange Volvo from the 70s, listens to soul and funk, and
yeah,
he's that character, right?
Like their first interaction together is Chandler trying to bother him about first day stuff, and then he accidentally ruins Henry's Commodore's bootleg. So he's going to put his boot up his ass, but then they find out they're partners and they have to get along.
It is your typical unlikely, what is that trope? The buddy cop.
The odd couple?
Yeah, the odd couple buddy cop dynamic.
The lethal weapon combo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just looking at pictures of Henry, and he's wearing pressed polyester bell bottoms, turtleneck with a leather jacket over it, and he's got his hair up in a nice rounded fro thing going on. It's the 70s. His whole character is very stuck in the 70s.
Yeah, and especially that Volvo, which is what I can only call 70s orange. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. It's just a brownish orange, someone set some orange paint on fire and it's been burned. And it did not come out right.
Mm-hmm. And so these two are teamed up. There's a little bit of background about, the big bad, who is this, shadowy Morlock demonic entity called LRNs. It kind of has a usual suspects, sort of who is Kaiser Soze thing going on there.
He could be anyone or no one. We don't know. He's literally only shown in shadows, even on his wanted poster.
You get the sense that he is the Moriarty of this series, although neither of them are particularly Sherlock.
Yeah. It's like Moriarty and Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah. And the thing is, they're both competent, but just deeply uninterested in being good at their job.
They could really clean up, but you get the feeling that these are people who have coasted on minimum effort for a long time, and they're not interested in putting forth that much. They do some, clever spy-fi kind of stuff when they try to flush out a lead on their case, but it's also, this moment that really kind of tells you exactly who these guys are.
Yeah, so the case that they're put on is someone has put an ad in a paper asking for information about this cold case that has basically been solved. right? Like, some guy's in jail, has been there for like 15 years for the murder of a police officer, and someone put out a reward for more information, and it just seems super shady.
It turns out that this person putting out the money is an old Russian lady, and the person in jail is her son. And she's convinced that he couldn't have done it, so she wants to find the real killer. And she's on screen for, I want to say, 10, 15 minutes. And then she chokes to death.
Yeah, she invites them into her house. You know, there's a like awkward conversation about like them trying to pretend to be reporters and asking things, but like she offers them these little meatball appetizer things, and there's this whole long like, do you want to eat it? I don't want to eat it. Just eat it. Just try it. It's she just made this food. Just try it. And then it's like, oh, this is not bad. And what is it? Of course it's some sort of testicles. It's goat balls, because yeah.
One of my biggest pet peeves in like joke writing is that joke where someone's eating something and they're like, oh wow, this is delicious, what is it? The person says, it's blah blah blah. And, you know, they're then completely disgusted by it. And it's like, it's not toxic. She didn't say, oh, I found that growing under my sink, and so I hit it with some uranium rays.
Yeah.
Come on.
The spit take, sort of like projectile, whatever thing.
Mm-hmm.
I get why they needed to do it for this episode, I guess. But yeah, it's kind of lazy writing, honestly.
Yeah, one of the weakest points of the episode, honestly, and it's over pretty quick, so whatever. But she dies. Henry's like, you should give her mouth to mouth, you know?
Yeah, well, she chokes on one of these goat balls, and then Chandler's like, I guess she's choking, and Henry's like, oh, yeah. Give her the Heimlich or something. I'm going to go wash my mouth out. Like, I don't care. And Chandler's like, she's had a good life. Yeah, it's fine. We just let nature take its course. Like, these two do not.
Henry literally says, let sleeping dogs lie is my motto.
Like, they are not good by any means. They are, at best, chaotic neutral.
Yeah, and it's really fun to watch, honestly. Because very next thing, they're kind of poking around. Chandler tries to call the police. Henry stops him. The phone's been bugged, so they do a reverse bugging. They call, leave a message that they have the info this person's looking for, and then set a date so that they can catch the person who's bugged the phone. But then Henry realizes that that person's going to be looking for the dead lady who has just died.
Yeah.
So they wrap her up in a blanket and throw her in the trunk.
Yeah. They don't, like, they just do not care. Like,
yeah. That old lady died. Nobody gives a shit. Like, there's no weight to that at all. The show's just like, yeah, that happened.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some more stuff that goes on, I guess. Like, Henry's car is stolen, and turns out that the car thief is Chandler's son, and they pull up next to them at a stoplight, and while they're chasing a suspect, and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
Henry's like, I want to go get my car. Chandler's like, no, we're chasing a suspect, and then we're on a case.
We gotta see this.
And then Chandler's like, wait a minute, that's my son. We gotta go chase him. And Henry's like, what?
We're on a case. We gotta see this through. Come on.
Yeah. Again, they're both so terrible at their jobs and deeply uninterested.
Yeah, like, normally I don't go for the lovable, terrible person trope, but, like, when it's done good enough, it'll get me, and that's certainly the case here.
Mm-hmm.
And before we forget, the Russian guy who has been framed, played by Dominic Keating, who people might know from his role as Malcolm Reed on Enterprise, among other things. Another very prolific actor who's just been working constantly. Mm-hmm. Who also played a different Russian guy in another episode a year later.
I didn't know he was British.
Well, I sort of picked it up when, like, he started talking. I was like, that's the worst Russian accent I've ever heard.
Oh, yeah, I thought it was
And it's like, wait a minute, I know that face. Holy shit, it's Malcolm.
I knew he was not Russian. I knew it was a terrible Russian accent, but I did not know he was British. I just thought he was an American doing a terrible Russian accent.
Yeah. And that definitely would have been the case on USA in the late 90s. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way they would have gotten an actual Russian actor.
But like many of the stars that we've encountered in these shows, he has done a ton of voice work for video games and TV shows and things. He was in Battle for Azeroth, the World of Warcraft game, Destiny 2,
And Destiny 1.
the original Destiny. He was in Diablo 3, Reaper of Souls, Epic Mickey 2, first Epic Mickey, I guess. Dragon Age Origins, a lot of things. Not like major roles, but he's been working constantly. Although, having said that, poor Clayton Rohner has not gotten a lot of work recently.
It's a shame. Like, I'd really love to see him in more stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his filmography seems to like fall off pretty hard after 2015. Like, he was in Human Centipede 3 in 2015. And then after that, he's been in like little bit parts in things, and he was in a absolutely terrible web series, but that was his most like recent large role.
Yeah, and I think before anyone asks, I'm going to go ahead and at least put my half of the show's foot down and say we're not doing any of the Human Centipede movies.
Oh, absolutely not. Never.
Glad we're on the same page there.
Yep. So, lots of stuff happens in the episode. They find out that the person that was killed, the police officer, actually was a Morlock who faked his own death, and that's why he was keeping an eye out on the mom just to make sure that nobody was like poking into it, because he was actually on the run from LRNs and his goon squad, and there's this whole big thing.
Yeah, well, it turns out the framed guy is actually LRN's top assassin, and the cop framed him in order to get him out of the way so he could step away from the life and get rid of one of the biggest obstacles to doing that in all in one fell swoop. And that's sort of, I kind of want to say thwarted by a poorly timed heart attack while they're talking to him.
Yeah, there definitely is a lot of like, they lucked out on a lot of things in this episode. Like, nothing really went their way, but they somehow managed to pull it off, kinda.
Yeah, there's one scene where they get a pretty huge clue as to the whereabouts of Cop Demonman from a Ouija board.
Mm-hmm. It's a wacky show. Like, there's just like a lot of wacky side characters, and they're believable because the whole thing takes place in Hollywood. You know, the number one place where deals are made, and Faustians roam around because everybody wants to be rich and powerful and beautiful. Yeah, there was a joke about Jane Fonda and Barbarella, and implying that the only reason she got even the role for Barbarella was because she made some sort of Faustian deal.
Yeah, they do the whole Men in Black gag where they have the wanted posters and he reads off a bunch of names, and one of them's Gavin MacLeod from The Love Boat.
It was an interesting twist. The assassin gets released from prison because he was kind of facing a midnight execution, and they managed to get him off the hook by producing the victim he supposedly killed.
All they had to do to get him out is get him to the hospital. Unfortunately, while they're in the hospital and while he's being released, that's when they find out that he is, in fact, the baddest of the bad. Which, any other show, you probably would have called that page one. But this show kind of plays dumb. Like, it doesn't want you to think it's smart. And then it just pulls the rug out from under you.
Yeah, it's a good setup. And then coming out of the first episode, you really get the sense that, okay, they're in way over their head, but somehow they're going to get through, and these characters are fun to watch. And it does everything that a pilot should.
It even goes one better, I would say, because in a lot of pilots, everything's wrapped up in a nice little bow, and there's only like the faintest thread of future plot happenings. But they kind of come out on top, but in a very real sense. They screwed up big, and they lost one. It ends with the Cop Demonman getting taken out. Cut to credits.
Technically, they accomplished their task.
Yeah.
So, like, as the audience, we know that they lost big. And, like, I think in the back of their heads, they know they lost big. But on paper, you know, you asked us to find what was going on here. We solved the case. We did it. We're done.
Yeah, but they basically had Hell's top hitman in their grasp, and he gets away in the end.
Yep.
This is definitely going to be a further watch for me. I'm for sure hooked on it.
It's a fun series. I dipped a bit into watching episode 2, which starts off super strong. I won't go through all of it. I'll just say that, like, I'll tease it by saying that it starts off with Chandler in an interrogation cell wearing a prison uniform, being questioned for multiple murders. And so it's a super interesting setup. It goes into like some backstory stuff. That said, caveat, it is a late 90s, early 2000s show, so they are very shitty about things related to gender, sexuality in a casual way. Like, it's just the, you know, oh, we'll make a joke about someone being queer because we can. And in episode 2, there is some like light transphobia and a trans panic attack, which was great to watch. And then some stuff about like queerness and other things. So it's
this might not be a buy anymore for me. I might need to just check it out on YouTube.
I would check it out. Again, I think it's a product of its time, and yeah, it's shitty, but not in the like we intend to be shitty to hurt people way. It's the shitty in the, oh well, of course we can use that joke because those people are always the punchline. It's fine, sort of 90s 2000s sort of way. So like
the hurtful but not intentionally hurtful kind of humor in the 90s.
Yeah. And, you know, everyone's tolerance is different. I just put that out there to, you know, give you the heads up. But it's not like a major component of the show. There are certain shows from that era that like have a certain meanness to them that I just won't watch. This one isn't mean. It's just kind of like...
Kind of a dick.
Kind of a dick, yeah.
I still can't believe I missed this show. I saw commercials for it all the time. It was definitely part of like my background noise for a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I really wish I'd given it a deeper look at the time because there really isn't a way to watch it legally right now, as far as we can tell.
No, we tried looking it up on Amazon. You can't buy it on video on demand. You can't really stream it anywhere legally. You can't even buy the DVDs, as far as I can tell. I
did a deep search. I went a few pages in. The only thing I could find is like a website that said it was the... I don't remember the name of it. It was really weird, but their tagline was the biggest video distribution website in Pakistan. That is not a joke. That is an actual thing I saw.
It's just not commonly available, so like a lot of things we feature on here, your best shot might just be to go onto YouTube and watch it there, which is how we both watched it.
Yeah, if you happen to have one of those weird relatives that just dove headfirst into DVDs when they first came out, they might have them in their cavernous disc collection. Otherwise, your best bet's probably YouTube. Mm-hmm. I'd just like to highlight a couple little things, though, that I thought were really cool. When they go to the burger stand in the first episode for the meetup, the scene card says, you know, like 12:15 Hollywood Burger with extra fries. And for all the break, you know, when they hit a part of the show where they're going to break for commercial, you get an interjection from the head of the Corps, Deacon Jones, real name, as himself, also possibly God, tight end for the LA Rams before they moved to St. Louis. I'm not a football guy, I don't know. But he plays himself, and he's a fucking delight.
LA Rams, yes.
LA Rams. He's in the orientation video where he's just at a desk and there's a bunch of football memorabilia behind him and he's just laying out the rules. It's a whole segment where like you get shot, you run over, you get stabbed, you die. And I could watch an entire video of him just doing that. It was great.
That was his most major role, I guess. He was in a bunch of movies and TV shows during the 70s, but he didn't really do anything throughout the 80s and 90s other than like a guest spot on The Fall Guy or something. That was one of the last things he did before he died in 2013.
From what I read when I glanced over his Wikipedia page, he led a pretty full, amazing life. He part of the best defensive teams of all time, I guess. Again, not a football guy. I can tell what's going on in the game by osmosis, but I couldn't tell you what the line of scrimmage is.
I can tell you a little bit more about football, I think, which is weird, but I do not care about football. But yeah, I've heard of Deacon Jones. He was in the NFL Hall of Fame. You know, famous football man. That's all you really need to know. But he plays an amazing character in the show.
He's great in the orientation video. When he first did the station break for the show, it was kind of like in the Duke Boys style. I was like, these guys have gotten into a heap of trouble. How are they going to get out of it? I thought I was going to get tired of that, but I ended up looking forward to it because he's just so much fun to listen to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he's only in a handful of episodes, but he sets the tone of the core so well.
Yeah, one of the quotes from the show that I saw crop up the most was from him in all my research, and it was, "In life, I've been beset on both sides by quarterbacks and demons."
That's pretty much all I have to say about G versus E, aka Good versus Evil. There are 2 seasons. If you can find them, good for you, because it's hard.
Yeah, this is rare as hen's teeth as far as we can tell. Like, sometimes with some stuff, I'll still find like a bootleg on Amazon, but there isn't even that. There's 2 promotional posters that have been framed and are going for $30, and that's it. It also looks like they did a promotional stunt for WWE Monday Night Raw in 1999, where Clayton Rohner and Richard Brooks appeared in character as Chandler Smythe and Henry McNeil.
The early 2000s were a weird time.
Yeah, David Arquette was champion for a little bit, wasn't he?
Yes. I mean, like, Raw was on USA, so that was a pretty good promotional tie-in.
That makes a lot more sense. Did you want to mention the knife? I saw you made a note about that.
Oh, yeah. The Morlocks that they're going after, you would think, oh, well, they're cops. I could just shoot them with guns. But since they are demonic, the only way that they can kill them is with this, like, Morlock killing knife, which looks terrible. It's this sort of forked, weird knife that you would buy at Cutlery World at the mall or maybe, like, at a flea market. And supposedly it's soaked in the blood of the innocent, whatever. It's really goofy, and they have to carry it around every episode because that's the only way to kill, like, Morlocks.
So I had somewhat of an ulterior motive asking you that, because I did in fact work in one of those cutlery stores for a little bit. That is in fact a real crappy knife that's sold for like $15. Yeah. I believe it's called the Scorpion or some bullshit like that. So yeah, can confirm. Yeah, that is 100% Mole Ninja bullshit. I probably
watched it on like the Knife Collector. Like at 2 a.m. as part of one of those, like, 150 knife bundles that they sell. Like, that's not really a show or a movie, but I could have a whole episode about, like, the Knife Collector show that's on at 2 a.m. when you are too tired or hungover.
I mean, we might be able to do an episode on that, because I remember at least 2 episodes of TV, one of Home Movies and one of South Park, where some character gets suckered into buying those, especially in Home Movies, where Coach McGurk is up at 3 a.m. drunk and he ends up buying them and taking them all in a bundle to soccer practice with him every day.
Yeah. I do not know why it is such a long-running thing, but yeah, well, we're digressing deeply in the Knife Collector world, but it's fine.
Yes. Coming back from the tangent.
Yeah, it's a Knife Collector worthy blade, and these poor fools have to carry it around every episode, and it feels embarrassing for everyone involved. But yeah, G versus E, supernatural buddy cop sci-fi fantasy action comedy drama series.
It's got a weird kind of fun charm to it that I really enjoyed. I hope the second episode isn't emblematic of the rest of the series. If it's not, then it's definitely worth a watch. If you can find it, this is going to be one of those hard to find needle in a haystack ones for sure.
Yeah. It's not something that I would recommend for everyone, but if it isn't particularly touching on sensitive subjects, I'm sure you would find it enjoyable.
First episode, definitely worth a watch.
Bonus weird trivia. They started with this naming. They tried to do an episode naming scheme where like they all had the word evil in it, but they could only manage that for about half the episodes. So
I remember in looking at the episode list, there's one episode in season 2 that sticks out just because it was called Dial M for Morlock. I was like, oh, I guess they didn't keep that up.
No, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Anyway, G versus E. Find it on YouTube or Pakistan's greatest
number one video store.
Uh,
I believe it was called DVD Movies Planet. I think I could be wrong. I can't confirm that it's a legitimate source to buy anything. So, it would make for a pretty good Saturday afternoon watch, honestly, now that I think about it.
Yeah. The episodes are not particularly they're not complicated enough that you need to focus on them. So if you're doing something else, that's totally cool too. I was playing a video game while watching it and I didn't really miss much.
I guess that's everything. Kate, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on TikTok and Twitter as Army of Meat. And where can people find you, Sky?
You can find me on Twitter at shard_corso. That's SHARD_CORSO.
And you can find our previous episodes on Spreaker. That's Spreaker.com/shows/interesting choices. Or you can find us on your podcast directory of choice. Apple Podcast, Amazon, Spotify, iHeartRadio probably. Like all the things. We're podcast. You know where to find podcast. You're listening to us.
I keep taking a look at the metrics and noticing services that I've never heard of before. So, search for us. We're probably there. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do so at our Patreon, patreon.com/interestingchoices. If you donate at the $2 level, we'll give you a shout out at the end of each episode for the month that you donate. And if you donate at the $5 level, you can help us pick what we do next. And if you have suggestions for the show, Kate, did you want to attempt it this time or did you want me to?
Oh, I absolutely do not know how to spell it. You can find us on Twitter at InterestingChoice6. That's Sky's job. INTRESTINGCHOI6.
Yep.
And that's where you can find us. So go watch some Interesting Choices. And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.